The Battle of Kursk is widely regarded as the largest tank engagement of World War II, unfolding between July 5th and August 23rd, 1943. It pitted the Wehrmacht's armored forces against the Red Army on a massive scale, with both sides deploying unprecedented numbers of tanks, assault guns, and supporting infantry. Despite the severe losses at Stalingrad, the Germans hoped that a concentrated offensive, known as Operation Citadel, could still punch through the Soviet defenses along the Kursk salient, encircle substantial Soviet forces, and regain the strategic initiative on the Eastern Front. Meanwhile, the Soviets, well aware of German intentions through extensive intelligence gathering, had fortified their defensive positions with belts of anti-tank ditches, minefields, and artillery, readying themselves for a pitched battle of attrition. In the southern sector of the Kursk salient, near the village of Tetravino, the fighting reached a fever pitch by early July. The Germans launched their assault with considerable confidence in their new and upgraded tanks, Panthers, Tigers, and Ferdinand, Elephant assault guns, alongside the more common Panzer IVs. Opposite them stood a determined Soviet defense composed primarily of T-34 medium tanks, T-70 light tanks, and a host of supporting units, including artillery and infantry equipped with anti-tank rifles and grenades. The third day of the operation, July 8, 1943, brought a critical clash that would later spark controversy, legend, and a fierce dispute over the exact details of what transpired. According to German accounts, a celebrated tank ace from the 1st SS Panzer Division, Untersturmführer Franz Staudeger, encountered and allegedly engaged more than 50 Soviet tanks, emerging victorious after a harrowing series of close-range battles. Soviet sources, however, remain divided and often dispute the magnitude of German claims, noting that multiple German units operated in the sector that day, and that attributing each Soviet loss to a single Tiger tank is a simplification, or even a propaganda exaggeration. To unravel the events, it's essential to explore both sides of the narrative, understanding the broader context in which these stories took shape. The German perspective, a desperate moment, turns into a legend. It was July 8, 1943, and across the scarred fields near Tetravino, the thunder of artillery and mortar fire was deafening. The once verdant farmland had been churned into a wasteland of craters, shattered trees, and smoldering wreckage. A German platoon, exhausted and covered in grime, found itself pinned in shallow trenches, while Soviet shells rained down relentlessly. Machine gun bullets whizzed overhead, ricocheting off stones and sending sprays of dirt into the air. The soldiers clutched their rifles, but they quickly realized they were not merely confronting infantry. They were facing an overwhelming formation of Soviet armor. On the horizon, war machines rumbled forward. T-34 tanks, the workhorses of the Red Army, spearheaded a massive counterattack. 9 tank brigades, bolstered by infantry formations, surged across the German lines with a momentum that threatened to smash through any resistance. Soviet commanders had identified a chance to launch a powerful blow against the German offensive, hoping to disrupt logistical lines and force the Wehrmacht onto the defensive. Caught in this onslaught, the German soldiers retreated from their exposed positions, scrambling across broken ground and leaping over the bodies of fallen comrades. A few grenadiers, however, were determined to fight back using newly developed shape-charge grenades, sometimes referred to as Panzerwerfer mines. These devices aimed to breach a tank's armor from close range. When T-34s literally rolled over their trenches, a handful of desperate men would lob these explosive charges onto the vulnerable rear decks of passing tanks, hoping to cripple them. Against all odds, they succeeded in knocking out 2 T-34s using this high-risk tactic, though such success was too isolated to halt the Soviet tide. Unbeknownst to the advancing Soviet tankers, a lone Tiger Wurst from the 1st SS Panzer Division lay in wait, concealed behind a low ridgeline, Commanded by Untersturmführer Franz Staudegger, this Tiger had lingered behind its unit to repair a broken suspension. With the rest of his company gone ahead, Staudegger found himself forced into a solitary rearguard action. The Tiger Wernte, armed with the fearsome 88mm KWK-36 cannon, was a formidable machine capable of knocking out T-34s from beyond the effective range of most Soviet guns. Still, it remained vulnerable if surrounded or targeted from the flanks. Given the heavy smoke, swirling dust, and the unpredictability of Soviet tactics, Staudegger and his crew had no illusions. They were in grave danger. Suddenly, 3 T-34s emerged from the swirling haze, advancing with little discernible formation. Occasionally, they halted to fire at the battered German trench lines, apparently unaware of the Tiger's presence. Recognizing a golden opportunity, Staudegger calmly instructed his gunner to open fire. The first 88mm shell whooshed across the battlefield, leaving a visible greenish tracer in its wake. It punched straight through the lead T-34's front hull, bringing it to an immediate standstill. Smoke billowed from the tank's interior as its crew struggled, likely wounded or killed by the devastating impact. Despite losing one of their number, the remaining 2 T-34s displayed no immediate reaction, likely distracted by the chaos of the broader battle. Staudegger's loader worked with practiced efficiency, slamming another armor-piercing round into the breach. The second T-34 exploded just as easily, engulfed in flames within seconds. Alerted by this sudden danger, the third T-34 tried to rotate its turret, but a precise shot from the Tiger disabled it. For a brief, surreal moment, it attempted to return fire, but the follow-up 80mm round shattered its turret ring and sent smoke pluming through hatches. Within a minute, all 3 Soviet tanks lay destroyed. Before Staudegger could pause to assess the situation, more T-34s began cresting a nearby railway embankment, one after another, until over a dozen had rolled onto the field. Shells buzzed through the air, fired by an increasing number of Soviet gunners who had finally spotted the Tiger. Machine gun tracers lit the haze with streams of red and green. Undeterred, Staudegger skillfully maneuvered his Tiger to avoid becoming a stationary target. Round after round erupted from the 88mm cannon, each finding its mark among the Soviet vehicles. Under normal circumstances, a lone Tiger might have been swiftly flanked or pinned down by multiple T-34s. However, the chaotic environment, coupled with dust, smoke, and poor Soviet coordination, gave Staudegger the advantage. Despite sustaining countless hits, some estimates put it at 67 impacts, the Tiger's thick armor held firm. Even if the Russian 76mm guns managed to land direct shots, most failed to punch through. When the Tiger's supply of armor-piercing shells began to run low, the crew switched to high-explosive rounds, relying on the massive blast effect to damage enemy vehicles and disorient their crews. As the minutes passed, multiple T-34s erupted into oily flames, while others retreated in disorder. Some tried to press forward, hoping to land shots from the flank or rear, but Staudegger expertly repositioned his tank among craters and depressions, never staying still long enough to be zeroed in upon. Realizing the futility of continuing the attack, the remaining T-34s finally pulled back over the railway embankment. In the immediate aftermath, Staudegger counted at least 17 tanks burning on the field in front of him. In an astonishing move, he then chose to pursue the retreating Soviets, driving the Tiger across nearly a kilometer of shell-torn ground. The recently repaired suspension somehow held together, enabling the crew to crest the embankment. On the other side, they found several T-34s that had regrouped, their crews possibly under the impression they were safely out of range. Staudegger opened fire yet again, scattering the Soviet tanks and destroying several more before they could mount a coordinated defense. By the end of this episode, official German records credited Staudegger with 22 T-34 kills, an extraordinary tally that would elevate him to the status of a war hero. He was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, and German propaganda celebrated his Tiger as seemingly invincible. The Soviet perspective, a grim struggle against overwhelming firepower. On that same July 8, 1943, the Soviet 26th Tank Brigade of the 2nd Tank Corps was moving southeast of Prokhorovka with orders to recapture two villages, Tetravino, believed to be near the main German line of engagement, and Luchki, located farther beyond. Captain Leonid Rygorodsky, commander of the 282nd Battalion, waited tensely inside his T-34, aware that the Germans had already seized parts of the area the day before. The overall instructions from higher command were vague, giving few specifics about enemy positions or fallback routes. To complicate matters, neither Rygorodsky nor his fellow officers possessed detailed maps. They had no accompanying artillery, and the supporting mechanized infantry remained far behind, forcing the tank crews to operate on their own. By 1630, a force of 32 T-34 medium tanks and 21 T-70 light tanks rumbled forward in a loose formation, heading toward the villages. Radio chatter quickly intensified as they approached the front. The Soviets began firing high-explosive shells at suspected German defensive lines. Each discharge from the T-34's 76mm gun sent a concussive wave throughout the turret, filling it with the pungent smell of cordite. Visibility was abysmal. Swirling dust, thick smoke from burning vehicles, and the cramped optics of the tank made target identification extremely difficult. Suddenly, the iconic wail of a Ju-87 Stuka dive bomber cut through the cacophony, its sirens meant to terrify defenders. Though Rygorodsky's crew braced for impact, they had no way to see if the bombs fell among them or struck other Soviet vehicles. Over the radio, confused voices overlapped, some reporting their tank had been hit, others shouting about German artillery. A few T-34s crested a small railway embankment up ahead. Moments later, Rygorodsky saw 3 columns of black smoke rising ominously in that same direction. Clearly, the forward platoon had encountered intense German fire. When Rygorodsky's turn came, he pushed his tank over the embankment alongside a few more T-34s, only to be greeted by a hellish scene. Artillery shells, mortar bombs, anti-tank grenades, and possibly direct fire from German tanks pounded the Soviet armor. Explosion after explosion lit the horizon, scattering dirt and shrapnel in all directions. From his limited vantage, Rygorodsky could barely discern muzzle flashes. When he managed to spot a distant flicker, he fired multiple shots, uncertain whether they found their mark. T-70 light tanks, less armored than the T-34s, were particularly vulnerable. All around him, Soviet tanks erupted in flames or ground to a halt as shells tore through their hulls. Realizing that further advances were futile in such disarray, the brigade commander finally gave the order to retreat. One by one, the surviving tanks reversed course, inching back toward the embankment amid a hail of incoming rounds. Some lucky crews managed to escape, but each withdrawal was a race against time. An 88mm tracer arced over the battlefield, smashing into a T-34 and creating yet another inferno. Every vehicle destroyed represented more lives lost to the already staggering tally of Soviet casualties. Ultimately, those who made it over the railway embankment found relative safety, at least for a brief lull in the fighting. By the close of the day, the 26th Tank Brigade had lost 21 T-34s and 1 T-70. Debris was scattered across the battlefield, with some wrecks lying near the embankment and others further back, possibly taken out by artillery or Stuka attacks. Amid this chaos, it was virtually impossible to assign specific kills to individual German vehicles with any certainty. Nonetheless, the official German line largely credited Franz Staudiger and his lone Tiger with all Soviet losses in the vicinity, overlooking the roles of other German tanks, anti-tank weapons, and air support. This simplified version of events became enshrined in German wartime propaganda, further enhancing the legend of an unstoppable tiger befers. A controversial legacy. From the Soviet perspective, the day's losses were tragic but not entirely unexpected, given the difficulties of navigating without proper maps, the absence of heavy artillery support, and the lethal effectiveness of German armor and air power. Many Soviet veterans recalled the day as yet another testament to the formidable challenges their tank brigades faced. Even so, the Red Army would continue its broader defensive and counteroffensive efforts, ultimately leading to a major Soviet victory at Kursk by mid-August. A victory that permanently ended the German ability to conduct large-scale strategic offensives on the Eastern Front. For Franz Staudegger, the events of July 8th became the foundation of his enduring fame. He was decorated with the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross and hailed in official communiqué as a prime example of German skill and valor. Serving in the SS meant he remained a controversial figure after the war, yet he was never prosecuted for any wartime actions and lived a quiet life, passing away in 1991. Opinions about his battlefield achievements, as well as the authenticity of the reported 22 T-34 kills, continue to spark debate among historians, who note that many kills could have been shared among other German tanks, artillery, or simply the attrition caused by combined arms. The Battle of Kursk itself was a turning point in World War II, marking not just a shift in momentum, but also heralding a change in the nature of armored warfare. The Soviet Union's ability to mass-produce effective tanks like the T-34, coupled with deeper defensive lines and improvements in tactics, gradually wore down the German war machine. By the end of Operation Citadel, the Red Army seized the initiative for good, pushing steadily westward until the fall of Berlin in 1945. Conclusion. The clash near Tetravino on July 8, 1943, encapsulates the chaos and ferocity of the Battle of Kursk. Powerful new weapons, overwhelming numbers of tanks on both sides, and acts of determination and courage that sometimes bordered on the suicidal. Franz Staudegger's Tiger engaged swarms of enemy armor, while Captain Leonid Rygorodski and his Soviet colleagues fought heroically against superior firepower under desperate conditions. The outcome, immortalized in various after-action reports and accounts, remains shrouded in legend, with each side emphasizing different aspects of the encounter. Even so, the undeniable reality is that Kursk as a whole was a grueling test of wills and technology that reshaped the course of the Eastern Front. Whether one believes that a single Tiger truly destroyed over 20 tanks in a single day, or that multiple German elements contributed to the carnage, the story stands as a testament to the brutality and unpredictability of armored warfare in World War II. Both the Soviets and the Germans suffered appalling losses at Kursk, but the Soviet forces emerged strategically victorious. In the larger picture, this victory signaled the inexorable decline of Nazi Germany's ability to strike back with large-scale offensives, setting the stage for the relentless Soviet advance that would ultimately end the war in Europe. Still, for many enthusiasts and historians, it is the individual stories, like that of Untersturmführer Franz Staudegger's legendary stand, or Captain Rygorodski's desperate attempted advance, that bring the battlefield to life. Each offers a glimpse into the personal bravery, fear, and determination that defined the men who fought in the largest tank battle the world had ever seen. Today, the Battle of Kursk continues to captivate us, a sobering reminder of the devastating power of modern warfare and the resilience displayed by those on both sides of the conflict. Support the channel and experience authentic WWII-style tank combat for yourself. Download World of Tanks using the special link in the description. Join millions of players worldwide and test your skills commanding legendary armored vehicles in intense, action-packed matches. From the T-34 to the Tiger I, you can explore a vast arsenal of historically inspired tanks, upgrade your crew, and lead your team to victory on dynamic battlefields across multiple eras. Take the lessons of Kursk into your own hands and see if you can outmaneuver and outgun your opponents, just as Franz Staudiger and countless other tank aces tried to do on the Eastern Front. Get ready to enter a realm where strategy, teamwork, and split-second decisions determine who emerges from the smoke and flames in triumph.